Greetings, this is Rosalind Parks with National Network View News. On tonight's show, we will speak with NNV Weekly contributor Brian E. Muhammad on the overnight assassination of Haitian President Moise and the Haitian uprising that began earlier this year after the government failed to hold new elections. Also, Brian E. Muhammad covers the situations in Afghanistan, Israel, and other locations mentioned in the latest Final Call news article, Intentional Blindness, Warmongering Keeps Feeding U.S. Downfall. Before we get into the top news, let's do a recap of the current events we've covered recently. Weekly contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad spoke with me on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic as it swept across the U.S. and the world, adding to famine, food insecurity, and the number of people unemployed. There was talk of famine at the beginning of this pandemic. Do you have any information about the food security in the world and in the U.S.?
Well, yes, I think that's a very strong point about the fact that famine was discussed in the beginning of this pandemic, but it's relatively been hardly any news about it since then. And I would say that with my research, most of what is being mentioned about famine is pertaining to countries that we typically associate with famine, and that is the countries, of course, in Africa that are having difficulty and have been having difficulties. And they're talking about that famine in those areas worsening. And some estimates are in excess of 200 million people will be affected in those areas.
Sister Cherie Muhammad, founder and director of Asiatic Minds Online School, shared how they are bringing together educators from across the nation to offer a full educational curriculum to our students in order to help them develop skills, talents, and abilities for themselves and our people. What inspired you to launch Asiatic Minds Online Education at this specific time?
Well, Asiatic Minds, it came about out of necessity. For many years, I'm a homeschooling mom, and I've homeschooled my 5 children for over 20 years. And throughout that time, I always wished that they were able to attend the MUI or have something that they could attend that would reflect our household. And so within that time period, I was introduced to an online school that was based out of Atlanta that my daughter, my oldest daughter, was able to attend. But it never occurred to me at that particular time to develop a school based on my beliefs and principles.
NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad's guest commentators, Dr. Asad El-Malik and Gavin Richards, commented on the temporary suspension of U.S. track and field star Sha'Carri Richardson after she tested positive for THC, the active ingredient in marijuana.
Is this the case? Is it an attempt to stop Black dominance in the Olympics, or is this just an example of a bad decision which has caused somebody to miss out on an opportunity that they've worked hard for?
There's a scene from the movie Friday where Ice Cube's character Craig is upset with Smokey because they had just gotten into it with Big Worm, and he said, and Smokey tells Craig, "I didn't put that joint in your mouth and make you smoke," right? So is this a way of keeping Black dominance out of the Olympics? I wouldn't go that far at all to say that. What I think it is a 21-year-old young adult made a mistake who was attempting to cope with the death of her biological mother, and she should have had better people around her who would have given her the type of support, community support that she needed in order to cope with such a tragedy in her life.
Willie Muhammad questioned Dr. Asad El-Malik and Gavin Richards about their thoughts on Bill Cosby's release from prison after his guilty verdict was overturned.
What are your thoughts about Bill Cosby's sexual assault conviction being overturned?
It shouldn't have happened in the beginning. I've been on your show platform many times. I've also talked about it on my platform. There was an agreement by the prosecutor, the original prosecutor, Bruce Castor, and that agreement was in writing. I believe he had sent emails and he communicated with Mr. Cosby's attorney at that time, who is deceased, that there would be no charges filed against Dr. Cosby. As a result of that, and Bruce Castor did not believe that the case, if it went to trial, that he was going to have a chance of winning, because he felt Andrea Constant, from the research that he had done and the lack of evidence thereof, there was not enough to go on. There was no probable cause, which is what a prosecutor is supposed to do. They administer justice, and they have to base it off of probable cause, not off political ambitions.
On I Have a Testimony, NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad's guest, Sister Medina Muhammad, shared her family experiences in the earlier years of the NOI, her mother's work as secretary to Master Fard Muhammad, and the influences of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Sister was just about to share just how it feels just to know that her mother and her father actually worked with the Savior who's responsible for the Nation of Islam. Go ahead, Sister Medina.
Okay, yes, sir. It wows me. Sometimes you never know the blessing you have in front of you until it's gone. I've learned more about my mother since she's been gone. She passed in February of 2002. And since we have been blessed to do the exhibits since 2007 with my brothers and a couple of my sisters, and we've been blessed from 2007 all the way up to 2020 to do the exhibits. And the doors that it has opened up for us is tremendous. With Dr. Stacy Muhammad in that exhibit. Oh my God.
Guest contributors Zakiya Sankara Jabbar and Brother Lawrence Muhammad sat down with Willie Muhammad to set the record straight about the criticism of actor Michael B. Jordan for referencing a Caribbean Emancipation Festival in the initial naming of his forthcoming rum product.
Which one of you all will be able to give us a brief explanation of what cultural appropriation is?
Sure, I'll go for it.
Yes.
And, so basically, cultural appropriation is basically taking the culture of another people, their mores, the things that they do within their culture, and using it for self. And some definitions say without the approval of that particular culture. Some definitions also say those who are in power taken from those who are not in power, those who are quote unquote beneath them. And so taking their particular cultures, using it for their own culture and as their own culture, basically stealing from someone else. So it's different variations of that definition, but basically it's the same, taking from one culture and bringing to another and claiming it, for themselves.
Zakiya Sankara Jabbar and Brother Lawrence Muhammad discussed the topic of West Point and white rage as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff defended the right of West Point students to discuss race.
What do you think is at the root of the white rage that has always been present in America, but is becoming more and more present during this time that is supposed to be this post-racial society?
Minister Farrakhan has talked about this, but I want to name Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, who has created the best definition of racism and white rage that I know of. And I think one of the things that's clear about what's happening is that certain white people understand that they are increasingly becoming a numerical minority in this country. And so there is a lot of fear really at the base of that. And so CRT, which, if we're going to be honest, is not being taught in K-12 schools, but it's a linchpin and a distraction, if you will, for the things that they really do want to enact.
Contributors Zakia Sankara Jabbar and brother Lawrence Muhammad also shared their thoughts on India Walton's recent Democratic primary win over the four-term mayor of Buffalo, New York, putting her on track to becoming the first woman to lead New York's second largest city.
What do you think about this historic victory of Sister India Walton?
Yeah, congratulations. Congratulations to the sister. I want to start a very positive. I understand politics, especially from the municipal level, because I have never run for office, but I've worked on campaigns, and I've been a part of understanding how the sausage is made, as a term that a lot of people use. And I will say that I think that it's good that she does have a worker and a working class focus. That's important. What I'm concerned about always, though, especially with politics now with Black leaders, is who is the hand behind the hand, right? Like who's actually controlling the system.
Rapper and lyricist Golden Child, a Chicago-based hip-hop music artist, was Willie Muhammad's guest on I Have a Testimony show, sharing his personal experiences, his unique delivery of the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and the guidance of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan through his music.
So how did you manage your practice of being a member of the Nation of Islam with growing up during your teenage years?
It was a challenge. It was a challenge. I won't lie to you, because you're young, right? You young. And I made a really, really big life-changing decision at the age of 16. And sometimes, a lot of the times, the decisions that we make around that age, aren't the best decisions, right? But I was blessed. I didn't really know. I felt that I was making the right decision. And as time went on, as I got older, I came into the realization that, I didn't just believe that I made the right decision. I knew that I made the right decision, as I continue to live life. But how I manage it, if we just going to be 100% honest, we're not going to pretend, we're not going to fake, we're not going to cap, as some people say. It was a challenge, right? I was an FOI, but I'm a human being, right? I make mistakes, right? We're not perfect. We sin. We go through our ups and downs. So I went through the same, in a lot of ways, the same challenges a young teenager go through. But it was different, though. I went through the challenges with men around me, right? And women around me,
Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. Coming up is our Global View segment with Brian E. Muhammad, covering the recent assassination of Haitian President Moise. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with NNVnews.com.
Haitian President Jovenel Moise was assassinated overnight amid an ongoing constitutional crisis in Haiti that erupted earlier this year over a disputed election.
Haitian President Jovenel Moise is dead after armed intruders broke into his home overnight. According to an official, the Haitian Prime Minister, the nation's leader, was fatally shot. His wife was also injured in the attack. NBC News has not confirmed the report. The statement did not identify the assailants, but said they were Spanish-speaking. This comes amid months of political upheaval within the country over calls for the president to resign. Again, Haitian President Jovenel Moise apparently shot and killed inside of his home.
Joining us to discuss this is weekly contributor Brian E. Muhammad, writer for the Final Call News. Greetings, sir.
Greetings, Rosalind. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We learned today that the Haitian president, Jovenel Moise, was assassinated overnight. Has anyone or any group claimed responsibility for his assassination?
No, no one has claimed responsibility. In fact, the reports that has been going on all day about it, particularly from the interim Prime Minister, Claude Joseph, who said that they don't know who did it. And there was some footage apparently that was captured where they heard English-speaking people and Spanish-speaking people, which implies that these were, outside mercenaries or outside foreign interests that did this act in the wee hours of the morning.
Are there any suspects being mentioned?
No, not yet. Just this general description and the vow of the Haitian government that the perpetrators will be brought to justice. But it's very volatile, and at this point, the various people that I've been speaking to throughout the day concerning this, it could be anybody. He has had problems with so many different elements and influences in the country that it's hard to tell right now just from face value of who it could have been.
Okay. Now, speaking of his issues that he's had since he's been in power, how did the Haitian president come into power to begin with?
Well, he was elected in 2016 elections, and he actually 2015, I think it was, but he was elected, and of course these elections was disputed at the time, and in fact his coming into office was actually delayed for almost a year at the time, which kind of leads into the current, you mentioned in your opening, the constitutional dispute that's going on now. And the constitutional crisis is rooted in that problem of those initial elections, because he's saying that, or his position was that since I was delayed into coming into office, then my term actually started at the end of that delay, which would take him to have ruled, if he had lived, until February of 2022. But the argument against that is the elections that many people are saying was rigged and all of that. I don't know, but this is what they're saying. And if it was rigged, they're saying that you actually came to power at a time where your rule would have ended in February of this year. And that's where that constitutional crisis situation came into play that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. So, what role has the United States and the United Nations played in the current crisis in Haiti?
Well, these were two, especially the United States, was two of the main outside meddlers, particularly the United States, meddling in the affairs of Haitian governance, Haitian life, controlling the country of Haiti, along with certain powerful elites, what they call the bourgeoisie, in the country. And it was the United States. Now, this issue with the United States meddling actually started in the early 20th century, around 1915 or so. You know, the United Nations came in to play more so when the United States orchestrated the overthrow of Aristide, Bertrand Aristide, who was the Haitian priest who was in power in the early 90s, and the United States overthrew him. And it was in that crisis that the United Nations came in and became like a security force for peace, so-called peace, so-called, when you're dealing with the United Nations, even so-called peace in the country. And that's kind of where this dual problem of the United States and the UN in the affairs, the internal affairs of Haiti, really jumped off the way we see it happening today. And so they have a lot to answer for, you know. And I just want to say this about the United Nations. They actually left the country recently, you know. So they're not on the ground there now in the way that they were. And people are calling for them to come back. There are elements calling for them to come back because of this assassination.
Mm-hmm.
But in Haiti, you got to be careful of who's doing the asking and why.
Right. Now, how has the Biden administration responded to the Haitian crisis?
Well, you know, if you want to look at it from the standpoint of the United States government, in the last administration, you had a president who kind of was hands off in terms of the world stage. I mean, Trump, he really didn't want to be bogged down with this problem and that problem around the world. And he had this thing that he called America First, meaning I look out for me, you all handle your problems.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you know, he was famous for calling Haiti and African nations and other Caribbean nations S-hole countries. And, you know, so Biden administration took a different take. They made a commitment that they will be more engaged in Haiti. But what does that mean?
Right.
For America, that means, you know, the last guy, he's still an imperialist, but he didn't want to, you know, it's like somebody who has a lot of responsibility, but they don't really want to be hands-on about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only difference between Biden and Trump. The Trump administration is committed to be hands-on with their imperialism, but it's the same thing for the Haitian people. So, you know, it's the same thing. So, but he did today, his response, you know, that it was a terrible situation, and, you know, and it's still yet to come out what his position is going to be, because he didn't really get any kind of reports yet on the assassination when they were asking him in the media. That may have happened by now, you know, at this hour of the day, but yeah.
Okay. Now, a few moments ago, you mentioned how the U.S. and the UN have had their hand in Haiti for many, many years. Has the U.S. and or the UN been controlling the secession of Haitian regimes since the United States coup against Haitian former president, and I'm going to pronounce this, John Bertrand Aristide?
Aristide.
Thank you.
Yeah. to answer your question, they have always, and I'm gonna separate the UN for a minute, but the United States has always meddled in every single administration that was in power, every president that came to power, and many of them were puppet regimes. Many of them were in the hands of America. So these were not necessarily good people. It wasn't since Aristide, Aristide was probably more independent of these outside interests like the United States. Okay. But the rest of them in some way were controlled and certainly very much influenced by the United States and looking out for the status quo, which is the power elite that controls the money there. You got a whole group of power elite, a small oligarchy of people that control the economics in Haiti. The United States backs that. The United States backed people like this current president. Now, again, why he was assassinated and whether or not, because there's no honor among thieves. Trust me, there's no honor among thieves. So maybe he messed up with his benefactors, which was the United States and these other outside interests. I don't know, but yes, to answer your question, they've had this running relationship with them all.
Okay. Now, very quickly, before we go to break, can you tell us, can President Moise's regime be compared in any way to the terror reign of the U.S. and France backed Duvalier family under Francois or Papa Doc, who ruled in Haiti?
Yeah, I mean, corruption is corruption, and I think that the real comparison, how do you compare corrupt people? Like, how do you compare? They both had so much bloodshed, both all three administrations, I would say, because Papa Doc and then his son, and they both was very problematic. All of them were problematic for the Haitian people, as we can see. I have to leave that to the analysts, the Haiti analysts, to say, where do we cross the T's and dot the I's, and and talk very specific in terms of comparisons. But they all were bad for the Haitian people.
Okay. Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. When we return, we'll bring back the discussion of this week's Final Call article, Intentional Blindness, Warmongering Keeps Feeding U.S. Downfall. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button, or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
At this time, when the nations will have to face the consequences of their deeds, the Final Call News reminds us that it is America's intentional blindness and warmongering that keeps feeding the U.S.'s downfall. We're back with Brother Brian with more on this. Greetings, sir.
So this part is a good conversation. Get a chance to talk about the prophetic where America is in Scripture and all of these problems in the world. But let me let you get to your question.
I'm ready. All right. Well, you and the Final Call News editor, Nabab Mohammed's article, Intentional Blindness, Warmongering Keeps Feeding U.S.'s Downfall, provides a wealth of information about the many conflict hotspots around the world. With all of these situations going on, which do you feel is the most imminently dangerous situation?
Yeah. You know, the great reggae singer Bob Marley sang a song, So Much Trouble in the World. And, I think that they all lend to the end of this world as we know it. I think certain hotspots are more dangerous than others. I think what's happening, this back and forth tug of war between the U.S. and Iran is a problem because it has the potential to draw the nations of the earth into war, which leads to a war that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan have constantly warned about from the scriptures, called the War of Armageddon, where all of these nations will be engrossed in this battle. So I think Iran is a serious issue, not because Iran is an issue, but the West response to it and this back and forth. Israel, definitely. Israel, because Israel is the instigator in all of this. It's Israel in that region, the Zionist state of Israel, they're the ones who is pushing for the nations of the earth to get into a hot war with Iran, and then their issue with the Palestinians that go unsolved. And the fact that that also has a potential to draw the nations of the earth in. And so between those two areas, I think if somebody was to ask me, as you did, what do I think is the worst? I think that those are the worst around the globe. Yeah.
Your thoughts on this. Do you think we are living in the day of God's judgment?
Yeah. We are taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and again, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan has been the chief warner in our midst today to talk about the time that we are in. And as many of you out there know, he has a lecture series called The Time and What Must Be Done. To be successful in anything, you have to know what time. It has to be something that is on time, and you got to know what time it is. And so, yes, we're living in a time of judgment. We're living at a time of a change of worlds, an old world going out and a new world coming in. And it's the turmoil in that friction of an old world going out, where even though they know their end was coming, they're responding like we're just not going to go out like that. So you got this turmoil, and it looks like they want to fight God himself. But yes, we're living in a time of what we call divine judgment.
As your Final Call News article states, at some point, the proverbial pot cooking, unjust U.S. foreign policy, and meddling in other nations must boil over. How will America fare as tension and conflict rise, simmer, subside, and then rise again?
Well, they will lose friendship. Right now, there is dissatisfaction in all the quarters of the world against America because of what America has done. The United States just don't go and hurt governments that they are at odds with. They hurt the people of those governments through sanction regimes, through through doing things that will hurt the masses of the people, in hopes that the people will rise up against their governments for change. But they are actually becoming more dissatisfied with America. But here's the thing. America is not going to be touched. I don't care if like what happened with 911, the unfortunate situation like that took place. No outside entity is going to destroy America or come in and do that and be successful. Because according to, and I'm just speaking from the standpoint of being a student of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Louis Farrakhan, who taught that America is a preserved place for God to deal with. America is first on the list of all of the nations that God is going to sit down to establish his nation, a government of peace that we can all, a universal government of peace where we all can live in peace together. God is not going to set up a new nation to add to 196 cesspool of nations at the United Nations. We're not the 197. He coming to establish a kingdom wherein he will be the ruler, the king, not one of a number of heads. There will be no more. They all will be removed and sat down. So yeah, this is where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm. And President Joe Biden pledged to pull out of Afghanistan by September 11th, the anniversary of the 2001 attack on the World Trade Center in New York. How long has the U.S. been in Afghanistan, and what does this mean for America's role in that place in the region?
Well, they've been there since 2001. And really give and take before that, because they were there backing what you call the Mujahideen fighters who were opposing the annexation of that land and the occupation of that land by the then Soviet Union. And of course, we know that the Mujahideen became Al-Qaeda. The leader of that, bin Laden, Osama bin Laden, was trained and financed by America at that time against the Soviets. And so if you want to hold someone responsible for these people, blame America. That was something made by America. Then they went back in after the Twin Towers went down on September 11th in 2001, I think it was, yeah. And they went into Afghanistan then, and they've been there ever since. This is the U.S. longest running war. So, but nobody has ever won a war in that area. That's historical fact. And America, the question that they're asking the military people now, did America accomplish what they went in to accomplish? In other words, did you win or did you lose? And the military people who've been answering this question is stuttering. If you won, you know you won. If you lost but can't admit that you lost, then you stuttering. And that's what they're doing. Now, will America's role be? That's an interesting question. Because the real reason why they went in was not going after terrorism. The real reason why they went in was because they wanted access to the oil that land have up there. And they needed access to the Black Sea. And so the oil pipelines who control the oil pipelines to the sea is who is king. And that's what that fight has been over all that time. That was the situation when the Soviet Union, now the Russians, when they were there, that's what all that's about. They had nothing to do with no terrorism. It had everything to do with oil. And so again, what will happen, because I'm sure they're not taking their eyes off of their prize.
Right.
But militarily, they cannot afford to stay there. America has lost a lot of blood and treasure in Afghanistan. And I would answer the question that the military leaders are stuttering over. You lost.
You lost.
You got your tail between your legs, and now you got to come back.
Mm-hmm.
As the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, what happened? He said that they will be ran out of that part of the world. They would be ran out, and it's happening right in front of our eyes.
Yes. Now, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan warned in a recent Final Call article that ultimately every oppressed people, every enslaved people, every people not free, find the way to become free. Everyone who takes the road of the oppressor, the enslaver, the exploiter is ultimately set down. Are we witnessing this now?
Yes. That's why you see them losing all over the world. There is a universal cry, an intense universal cry for justice everywhere in the world, where people are rising up against their own tyrants. It's happening in Africa. It's happening in what they call the Middle East. It's happening in the Far East. Look at how they responded to the coup in Myanmar. Now where the military was successful in controlling and containing the people for many, many years when they rose up before. This last time that the military rose up, there were elements of the people that's beating the military back. I mean, they're responding in ways that they didn't respond before. Look at what happened after the killing of George Floyd. Yes. Look at the backlash against the security apparatus of this country called the police. This is a new day for the Black man, and the Black woman. This new generation is a generation that has no fear of the oppressor. Well, why is that? Because they're not experienced fighters in liberation. They didn't live in the 60s. That was their grandfather's time. That was, but now there's something in their heart. I believe that it is God himself is now in the heart of the people and is moving against his enemies. They're responding this way. So to answer your question, that's what we're looking at.
Yes, sir.
They're slipping. They cannot do it the way they used to do it. It just will not happen. Our young people are not going out like that. And I'm saying for our young people here in the United States and throughout the world, this current generation is like, hell no.
That's right. Yes, sir. Let's pause for announcements one more time for our sponsors. When we return, we'll have more insight from NNV contributor Brian E. Muhammad. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Classes begin September 1st. To enroll, visit AsiaticMinds.com.
This is Sister Sajida Muhammad we are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story headline reads, "Severe weather lashes America." As hurricanes struck the South and tornadoes hit the Midwest region, droughts strangle Western states as the forces of nature and the destructive force of weather punishes the United States. The divine judgment of God is intensifying in the country. This FCM Volume Number 39 edition middle page article by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is entitled, "God Has Come for the Black Man and Woman." To read more, subscribe to finalcalldigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the nnvnews.com Final Call cover report.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
Thank you for returning to us and staying with us through this segment. We have Brother Brian back to give us more insight on the global view. After excessive Israeli airstrikes in May killed nearly 300 Palestinians in the recent bombardment, will the U.S. finally restrict its military funding to Israel?
That would be good news, but no, they won't. And in fact, the after this last skirmish in May, where over 300, or nearly rather 300 people, Palestinian men, women, and children died, and much property damage was done to Palestinian areas like Gaza and the West Bank. The United States turned around and offered or approved an arms sale to the tune of $200 and I had it in front of me. It was $200 and something million. Now, they already get $4 billion a year, as we know, of our taxpayer money. They are the biggest welfare recipients in the whole world, Israel. And that's just what they get from the United States. If we do the numbers that they get from other countries, I mean, it's just that much more. But they signed I'm looking for the figure because I want people to know what their government is doing. You know, it was well, I can't find it, but it was it was millions of dollars worth of arms, and really it was to replenish what they used against the Palestinians just last month. But why would you do that? And even though it has not been put through Congress yet, analysts are saying that there's no reason why they believe that the Congress people will say no to the Biden administration of making this arms sales to Israel. It's crazy. It's crazy. So no, they're not going to stop. They can't stop.
Is America the leading arms dealer globally?
Yeah. In fact, they found that America had increased its sales in arms. I'm talking about these big ticket military arms sales around the world by 37%. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. And they and I just want to maybe just read this right quick. It's a small piece to your to really give a picture. And this came from the Stockholm International Peace Research Center, which is an institute which keeps up with these numbers of global arms sales around the world. It said numbers from April revealed America supplied major arms to 96 nations, far more than any other supplier. Nearly half, nearly 50%. It was 47%, but that's nearly half of arms sales of all went to the Middle East. Saudi Arabia accounted for 24% of total U.S. arms exports. See, and why is that important for us to know? Because they are buying these arms, but they're not aiming these arms at the biggest arms. Really, the biggest arms problem is the state of Israel. If you notice, Israel is the only country in that region that has nuclear weapons.
Yes.
See, they want to say Iran, but Iran is not really in what you call the Middle East. It's more Asia, what they call, but the point is, Israel has nuclear weapons. No other country has nuclear weapons. But then when you see them buying these arms, they're not talking about containing and put Israel in check. All of them are talking about we're getting these arms because we got this problem called Iran near us.
Right.
Particularly Saudi Arabia. See? It says this. So you're buying these arms to kill each other as Muslims? How are you killing your own Muslim brother? Over a political problem, over geographic issues, real geopolitical problems. At the instigation of Israel and America has, I don't care what America says about bringing some of these deals down, scaling back.
Yes.
They have to sell these arms because this is where they make a lot of money. It's about the money for America. So they're not interested in peace.
Mm-hmm.
They make money when it comes to war.
Right.
So,
Brother Brian, speaking of Iran has been suffering under the U.S. Sanctions.
Mm-hmm.
Have the so-called moderates lost faith in the Islamic Republic?
Well, I think that, no nation enjoys, or no leadership enjoys 100% satisfaction from its people. The Iranian people, they want peace, and they want to live their lives, without the threat that they were under. This is politics. Whether or not it's the more moderate thinking ones, and really a lot of times in that part of the world, when they say moderate versus those who aren't, the moderate ones have more of a taste to appease their enemies, like the United States. They have more of a propensity to play ball with the European Union and others who may not do things for the best interest of the Iranian people. So I'm not taking sides, don't get me wrong. All I'm saying is that when you say moderate, we got to look at what are the politics involved in the moderate versus the others. I don't know if the Iranian people have lost taste or not. I think the people have always been consistent. I just want to live,
right,
raise my family in a sane environment,
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Brother Brian, very quickly before we close out for today, you mentioned the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and some of the teachings earlier in our segment. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said America is number one on God's list to be destroyed. How is this to come about?
It's coming about. It's happening right before our eyes. In the Holy Quran, Allah talks about the disbelievers and the hypocrites and all of that. And when you look at these people who qualify for that, and if you qualify to be destroyed by God as America has so much did to themselves, you have to look at, did God do this to them? Or did they do this to themselves? So the Holy Quran says, we wrong them not, but they wrong their own souls. There's a natural that you reap what you sow. Justice is that. What goes around comes around. See? So if you are recalcitrant, and every nation, like any individual, as we mentioned earlier in the words of the Omniscient Farrakhan, see, every individual, every nation's success in life is truly dependent, and its longevity, nation's longevity, is dependent on how they relate to the will of God. So if you are a tyrant, you cannot live in a day when there will be no injustice. You cannot live in a day where there will be universal peace and you're a warmonger. And so God warns them of this. And when they do these things precipitously, continuously do this, they put themselves outside the pale of the will of God. But did God do this to them? No, they did this to themselves. And he is merciful by even saying, if you stay on this course, this is what's going to happen to you. If you drive inebriated under the influence, you might hit something and die. Well, they've been under the influence of Satan. This world has been under, and we're saying that if you continue to drive this nation under the influence, something bad is going to happen. We're not saying it. God himself is saying it.
God is saying it. Thank you so much for all of your insight this evening, Brother Brian. We look forward to speaking more with you on the Global View Report next week.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for joining us today and tuning into National Network View News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Rosalind Parks with National Network View News. Good night.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.